Hey, everybody. It's September 28th, 8:15 in the morning in the Pacific Coast, but 10:15 here in Montgomery, Alabama, where we are, and then 11:15 where our special guest, Dr. Cheryl Cunningham, is at in Ohio. So we three right here are Dr. Scott, Mr. Malden, and I'm Ivory Kennedy from Ohio State University. And then Cheryl, who are you?
I am Cheryl Cunningham, and I am a professor of communication and digital media at Wittenberg University,
Which is in Springfield, Ohio.
which is in Springfield, Ohio.
So this podcast episode is one of a two-parter. Tomorrow, I want to talk about Vice President Harris's speech at the border that she gave yesterday. Okay, so I want to highlight that, and I'm going to be mostly off screen, but you can hear me audioly. So that's tomorrow. Today, we want to highlight this rhetoric, this language, this attack on the immigrant community of Springfield, which is in the context of a much larger line of messaging that Donald Trump has developed around small town America under assault in the United States. Okay, so we're going to start with this clip from 2 days ago at his rally in, I think it was in North Carolina.
With left-wing nonprofits to inundate Pennsylvania communities, changing the character of small towns and villages all over our country and changing them forever. They will never be the same. They will never be. Do you think Springfield will ever be the same? I don't think. The fact is, and I'll say it now, you have to get them the hell out. You have to get them out. I'm sorry. To get them out. Can't have it. Can't have it. They've destroyed it. It's terrible. It's terrible to say, and it's a tough with left-wing nonprofits to inundate Pennsylvania communities, changing the character of small towns and villages all over our country and changing them forever. They will never be the same.
I'll stop there.
Okay.
Okay, so let me get off the screen share. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have each of the folks who are the guests here just share their thoughts about what Trump's saying, what he's doing, and why it matters. Let me start with you, Dr. Scott.
What he's saying and what he's not saying. So undergirding that whole argument is the idea of whiteness. So when he's talking about small town America, he is conflating race with that. Whiteness, a sense of ownership. This is a normalized notion of what a small town is supposed to be. And these immigrants are changing the face of that forever. They're somehow putrefying the whiteness. And so it'll never be the same. Race is at the baseline of this and capitalizing off of this sense of privilege that he's hoping his constituents, and he knows that many of them have.
Dr. Cheryl, are you able to hear us okay?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. That's a good check on everybody else hearing us. Okay, thank you. Anything else you want to say right now?
I have a lot to say, but I'll pause.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Malden, who's a champion with us of Common Power, civil rights American hero.
What's wrong with changing America? Every immigrant group who've come into America has changed it, and normally for the best. You know, I celebrate change. I celebrate difference. I celebrate the fact that our culture is revitalized by new immigrants, whether they were Italian or Jewish or any other Hispanic, any other culture. I love food. You know, food is in culture are great harbingers of of new life. You know, and I welcome why he's talking about celebrating white immigrants. Half of his family are immigrants. And 2 of his wives were immigrants. So what's wrong with new immigrants except for color?
Thank you, sir. And Ivory, can you just say a little bit about where you're coming from today?
Yeah, so I have family in Springfield. My great uncle He's since passed a couple years ago, but he's from Springfield. I think it's interesting that the crowd is chanting, "Send them back." And I did a little research this morning, and I wonder how the natives who were very prominent in that area, particularly the Shawnee, and the Battle of Piqua, which is a city in not too far from Springfield. But I wonder how they felt when the same kind of refugees and immigrants were, infiltrating into Ohio, trying to take the land, and eventually did take the land from those who belong there. And to claim that as they're saying to send them back, I just think about what the indigenous perspective is to hear somebody say, send other immigrants back, when those were people seeking refuge in Springfield. So the irony of claiming of land is very puzzling. But again, if you don't know that history, then it's not something that would be top of mind.
Dr. Cheryl, I'm going to actually have you pause because I want you to talk specifically about living in Springfield in a moment. I want to go back to Dr. Scott. I want to get even more direct and candid about all of this. So he's talking about Haitian immigrants, okay? Haitian immigrants, and they are legal immigrants. What do we know about these folks actually?
If I am correct, within the last few years, about 10 to 12,000 Haitian immigrants have legally arrived in Springfield, Ohio. And according to people that are very well integrated into the community, I'm a first generation Haitian immigrant. My mother and family immigrated here from Haiti. And it is hard to divorce the personal kind of assault from this, as well as identifying as an African-American woman at the same time, and understanding the inherent otherness of this and how lethal it can become and historically has been. It's despicable and outrageous. It is as though we have walked back into the history books that we write and learn from. And so the fact that this is happening in 2024 seems so out of place, but it reminds us that in fact it's not. It is what we are confronting. It reminds us that we have to work diligently all the time to continue to pick up the torch that Mr. Molden has held and carried for so long to continue to create change. At a baseline level, if I don't want to kind of be academic about it, it's disgusting. It is insulting. When I look at my Haitian family and what they have contributed and done and their successes and the way that they have come to a country to help to make it better, like so many others, it's shocking to me. And it makes me want to, and I don't have to say, look what each of us have done. I'm not required to kind of give a list of all of these things, right? Because we belong here just as much as anybody else. To your point, to say that somebody would have the nerve to chant "go back" when this country was colonized, but to have an absence of that. And it's not necessarily an ignorance toward the history. It is a selection to determine what is normal, what is baseline, and what is not.
Mr. Charles, you were there in the 1950s and 1960s when you were fighting for civil rights, and you led the way. You have been one of the leaders there. Does this sound like a George Wallace to you? What does this sound like to you?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about. You know, there have been two dominant streams in American life. There's the high road and the low road, to keep it simple. And Donald Trump has no options except to infuriate and to castigate and to belittle people and take the low road because he considers that politically expedient. He does not have a program, so therefore he develops an attack. The only thing he has left is to attack people, and he's using the Haitians just like he used the Republican Party and everything else that are tools for him. Everybody's a tool for Donald Trump.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Haitians are the latest tool that he can use to promote himself in his own small-minded perspective.
Does it matter, Dr. Scott, that Haitian immigrants also have skin color that's darker?
Oh, well, 100%, right? Color is at the base of this. He's not talking about French immigrants or immigrants from Western Europe, right? And we see a kind of repeat. I mean, this is history, once again, even Eastern Europeans coming over, Asian immigrants. So this is color is at the base of it, period. Not only the color of the individuals, but the value of whiteness that people feel is being attacked. That part of it is at the base of it too, because there is no value to whiteness without the presence of blackness or this other color. And so the value of whiteness is being attacked right now. And Trump is leading this and he is trumpeting this, but Trump becomes a reminder, what's happening in this country becomes a reminder that a single person can't do it. Sometimes we're here with a group of teachers. Sometimes teachers teach about, for instance, Nazi Germany, and it's Hitler, 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 with a dismissiveness of that person can't exist without the masses that herald that person. We are watching the masses herald an individual, and he has no power without the buy-in of all of these masses. That's what makes it the scariest part.
Okay. I'm gonna go to you, Dr. Cheryl, now, and then eventually in this podcast, I want to get to the truth and that you, Dr. Cunningham, live in Ohio, that you, Ivory Kennedy, live in Ohio, and that this is being led by a vice presidential candidate who is a senator in Ohio. Okay, but Dr. Cheryl Cunningham, I had the great privilege to work with you as a PhD student at the University of Washington, and just been so impressed and appreciative of your work. Can you go ahead and just introduce yourselves to us and how you come to this podcast?
Yeah, so I'm coming to this podcast as someone who has worked at Wittenberg University in Springfield, Ohio since 2008. And I am also coming to this podcast as someone who is from Ohio originally, right? I lived out on the West Coast for a while when I got my PhD, but for the most part, I am an Ohioan, right? And so there are many levels of this that are disturbing to me. And we also have some things going on at the state politics level that, you know, uh, enable some of this kind of stuff to happen, right? So like a gerrymandered state level legislature too, that is completely controlled by one party at this point. So, and then, I am a teacher of students at Wittenberg, and, they have been threatened, right? Their lives have been threatened because of that debate on September 10th.
So what is it? Can you give us some images, some sense of what it's like there right now?
Yeah, so what it's like there right now. So the week after the debate, there were several just continuous bomb threats, basically, to our university, to the city. They had to put the hospital on lockdown one day, the elementary schools, the high school. And so a lot of that happening. What we were asked to do at our university is, because a college campus is almost impossible to protect because there's so many entrances and exits and just ways on campus and ways off of campus. So we were asked to go completely remote the week of the 16th. So everybody just had to move their classes online. And some students went home, some stayed on campus, some, had to stay on campus because they couldn't get home because they lived too far away, right? So it was pretty chaotic for the students. I think the staff were also asked to work remotely, those who could. And so we did that. And then our administration, various members of our, the campus administration had been meeting with, local police, state police, the governor's office. Eventually, they decided to provide some security resources, right? Because we also don't have the budget for private security and all this kind of stuff. So we now have multiple police officers on campus. We have two, they're called Eye in the Sky mobile observation towers on campus. So it has created, right, this sense of increased surveillance, right? Which is, for the protection of the people on campus, although some people are made uncomfortable by increased surveillance, right? So that is the state we are under. But I will say that Governor DeWine's office, he is also Republican, and he has been very supportive of us trying to get the help that we need, or that we think we need, right? We don't, it's like you don't even know, because you don't really know exactly who is behind the threats. I mean, the people that are dealing with it know more than I do. So, my knowledge of where these are coming from and who they're coming from is limited, but I think it might also be limited in that, they're coming digitally. So it's hard to tell if they're even, and there's some evidence, I think, that it's from outside of the country as well. So we
Oh.
see some of that same kind of like election, um, the same kinds of things that we saw in some of the 2016 and 2020 elections in terms of where disruption is coming from. And it's not necessarily local.
Go, yeah.
So, it's a little bit shocking to me. It appeared that a US senator and an ex-president of the United States has a city under siege.
Yeah.
Is that true?
That's how it felt. I mean, and I know that they were able to open the local schools earlier, like the elementary school, high school. They were able to go back sooner because they were able to actually position people,
Yeah.
at entrance points and exit points, right? So that they could cover those areas because they're sort of discrete locations. But yes, that is what it has felt like. I mean, when you have your one major hospital in town has to go on lockdown because somebody's threatening that. And over what? Our lives.
Right.
So that's what I would like to go, one of the things that the refusal, and especially on the part of JD Vance, to distinguish between legal migration and illegal, right, is shocking to me. And I think that's one of the things, when I go back, this idea of send them back. Well, number one, the them never gets defined, right? So then the audience, right, gets to fill that in, right? But the audience is being asked to fill that in, right, in a particular kind of way when you mention Springfield. Because to go back to what Dr. Scott was saying, everybody knows that we're talking about Haitian migrants. And everybody knows that most Haitian migrants are not white. Right. So we have this go, and I will say, I had a discussion with a student in one of my classes who is an immigrant, but she is white. And she has had the very unfortunate experience, right, of people saying things, right, about immigration around her and having to say, hey, hold on, right? I'm an immigrant. And then that sort of uncomfortable silence that follows until somebody says, well, I don't mean you.
Yeah.
And then she has to say, so who do you mean? Who are you talking about and why? And she's like, and tell me how that isn't about racism. So she's been put in that spot and she's like, I just don't know what else to ask them to be able to get to the point, of what we're really talking about.
It could, I'm at a loss for
Yeah,
words
it's
here,
a lot,
okay?
yeah.
One
Sorry.
No, one thing I want to ask Dr. Cheryl is, it doesn't matter how many migrants we're talking about, but I just want to get a sense of how outrageous the lies are, right? The number that Trump and Vance use all the time is 20,000 Haitian immigrants. And what is the relative actual number, and how do they, and the argument is made by them also that they're somehow destroying the community. Can you respond to both the numbers and their sense of their how much they're actually welcomed into the community?
Well, I think any messaging that I've seen from the city of Springfield or local businesses has been very welcoming, right? So this idea that they are unwelcome or causing some kind of ruin, right, is questionable. I think where, the sort of on the ground things that you do have are, I think that there is a lack of like language resources, right? So that's going to be a problem, just in terms of people being able to communicate in that way. Right. So I think, but for the most part, it has been, from my personal perspective, welcoming. And the number is not 20,000. The number is probably somewhere between 10 and 12. And those are numbers that, I would be getting from city officials, right? But that's what has been reported. That's what they have said. So the number itself is inflated. The other thing is this, right? tell you another story. I have another colleague at Wittenberg who didn't realize that there was a large Haitian population in Springfield. So this idea that it's like this situation that no one can handle, she's like, well, I think the fact that I didn't know that tells us all we need to know about the problem. Like this doesn't, there have been pressures, and I think another pressure is housing, right? So, but that is also a problem for the city of Springfield that has been around for a while, of sort of absentee landlords not taking care of properties, right? So there are, if people had been taking care of a lot of their properties around town, there wouldn't be a housing issue, right? But Springfield has also been a pretty economically has I would say economically depressed area since probably about 2003. They lost a lot of manufacturing. Some of that has come back, right? So there's a whole complicated politics of the city of Springfield and of how jobs have left and come back, and right, who works in the manufacturing jobs now. So I think that there's a whole history here. And what I'm really interested in, right, is these politicians who care so much about Springfield now. Like, where were you when huge sectors of the city were dying, right? And needed support. Okay? But you're willing to sort of utilize that now, again, right, as was already said, as a point of political expediency, right? Because this is what's going to work for you for the next week or two.
Ivory, let's come to you. So you said you have family in Springfield and you live now in Columbus,
Right.
Ohio, right? So what is this? What is it feeling like to you?
I have a lot of different things going on in my head right now. The night of the debate on Facebook, a lot of my friends and family that do live in Springfield were like, at first it started off as a joke because they're like, man, why are they making a joke about Springfield? And then the next day it became, man, this is getting really serious. And then I have people that I know that work in the city buildings, and those were being evacuated because of the bomb threats. And it is mind-boggling to me that politics is being, there's so much weight in this political advantage to talk about it versus the people, right? This is legitimately politics over people, because these are still humans, and they're not just, Haitian migrants who work or live or function in any of the places that have been shut down. Like, you are doing more damage to the community of Springfield as a whole. So as people, Governor DeWine, I want to say this was 2 or 3 days afterwards, gave a speech about how the comprehensive approach to immigration was left behind in the early 2000s because it became a political tool to just talk about. And slowly and surely, it has just evolved into this political talking point without comprehensive immigration. And regardless of politics or political party, he was very clear that if we had a comprehensive approach to welcome immigrants into our society, we wouldn't be facing issues like that. The Haitian Times interviewed the CEO, a CEO of a manufacturing company, and said that on the economic front, local businesses has benefited from the new labor force. Industries that were once struggling to fill positions, especially in manufacturing, because this is the Rust Belt, have welcomed the Haitian workforce. And the CEO said, without Haitian associates, that we would have had trouble filling these positions. So, send them back. Okay, so then what does that mean for that CEO's top dollar if we care so much about the economy, if that's going to be the talking point? On the personal perspective, I work with pre-service teachers, and in Columbus, we have a high influx of migrants and Haitian migrants. We have had to adapt our permission slip policies. We have had to adapt our communication strategies at our university to accommodate the influx of Haitian students who speak Haitian and Creole. And the fact that resources are being surged to Springfield to protect against bomb threats and evacuations, but not the education of these students. Because if you care so deeply, then why not welcome them, have them be educated, have a fair shot at contributing to the very same society that is suffering because of the lack of political action that hasn't taken place. And I just wonder how many teachers were in that crowd chanting, send them back. I wonder how many teachers are aware of the economic boom that these Haitian migrants are bringing to the city. I wonder how many teachers could be talking about this in terms of immigration as a whole, because again, going back to the history, this is not the first time that a presidential administration or presidents have used the idea of Springfield or used Springfield to portray a message. The Jefferson administration was they created the second national road going from Maryland to St. Louis, passing right through Columbus and Springfield. So Springfield is at the heart of America's heartbeat in terms of manufacturing and railroads and all of that. So, to have great American pride would be to celebrate the fact that who built those railroads? Probably natives and African Americans, but who benefited from those are the same people chanting, send them back. So you can't have it both ways. As an Ohioan, as somebody that's lived here my entire life, to see a senator like you have Sherrod Brown, who's always out and about and doing his thing with everyday Americans. And then you have JD Vance admitting that he's telling a fabricated story and then justifying that by saying, well, we need to put attention here anyway. It's like, well, dude, I'm pretty sure at the snap of a finger, you could be there and at the stroke of a pen, create legislation that would benefit the same people who you are antagonizing. So it's frustrating, but it's energizing for me because, Haitian people vote, especially those that are registered to vote because they're here legally. So we'll see what happens, but I don't know. It's frustrating because it's puzzling. I had a student, I had a pre-service teacher student. She came in, she said, Ivory, I don't know how to connect with the student. And the teacher just said, hey, I'm going to stick you with this student. And she's like, well, what do I do? And I said, well, do you have ESL at the school? Like I had to go through the list of things that you do to accommodate students who are newer to a school district because you have to be in school. And no teacher had any idea of how to best service them. So I talked to our world language, my colleague who does language. So that's what started this process of permission slips and so on and so forth. But the educational side of this is just sad because we could be doing so much more, surging resources to help these families out. And they're contributing. They're contributing.
And Ivory, you said to me a day or two ago, yesterday, I think you said, I think I need to run against JD Vance. Right. So whether or not it's a real serious statement, is that a serious statement? And if it isn't like, yeah, for sure. I want to do what's going on that even gets you to say those words?
Looking at American history, politics is just a tool to further the Democratic promise, in my opinion. And I know and care much more about rural America. I think about Jance's Hillbilly Elegy and the fact that you once were, you talked about rural America in a way in which you couldn't relate to. And I grew up in the inner city, but I spent a lot of time on the back roads in Ohio where you see nothing but cornfields is what people say. But there's a beauty in that because there's a promise in that because that's where America comes from. And that is not up for debate. It's not up for debate. So when I say that, I mean, I feel like I could talk to everyday people and have conversations and say, okay, how can we make this better? Take that to an office, figure out how do we create policy that benefits this and then do it because I'm not going to go to rallies and make jokes about Diet Coke and all of the things that he does because it's not benefiting people like me that live in Ohio. And if you can't represent the people, then I will. So that's just my person.
Okay, let's kind of go into the final part of this podcast. And Dr. Scott, I want to come to you and then to you, Mr. Charles. So can we all agree that this is not a good faith argument by Trump and Vance, that they don't really care about the immigrant economics or education, that they are using these Americans as tools, racialized tools to benefit a particular political agenda. So given that is what is going on here, what exactly are they hoping that this does? What exactly at the most crudest basis form, what do they hoping is happening here?
What I've said from the beginning, what they're hoping is happening here is that they can capitalize on people's sense of loss that is tied completely to their racial identity. And so they can capitalize on people's whiteness and say, this is rightfully yours. Somebody else is coming in and taking this from you. They're making everything in your life harder, and they're going to destroy your community and what belongs to you by nature. We have a pathway to stop them from doing that, to return America to you. That's what they're hoping is happening. And unfortunately, it's working with so many people. It is a shocking number of people for whom it works. You mentioned how many teachers are in that crowd. There are teachers, there are pastors, there are all sorts of people for whom it seems counterintuitive that they would buy into those arguments, because we assume that they have dedicated their lives to a work of service, and that that service should inherently include all people. But what it demonstrates is that it doesn't always. And so it shows us the work that we have to continue to do. And it can be disheartening. People are listening, they're like, what are we going to do? It seems like we're losing. We're not losing. And that's what we always have to remember, because we have made tremendous strides in this country.
Yes.
We have faced far worse. We sit here at this table as an integrated group. We would be arrested in Montgomery, Alabama, where we are right now, if things had not gotten better. And we have to hold on to that as we continue to fight to legislate things and to change people's hearts and minds. And I always say, if we can't change their hearts and minds, then we can legislate the shit out of their ability to harm us.
That's right.
Mr. Charles, go ahead.
I was on the Edmund Pettus Bridge 59 years ago, and the governor of the state did something very similar to what your senator and our ex-president is doing right now. And I understand the type of harm that people like that create. And I thought we had gotten far beyond that. But we're confronted right now with the return of that type of sentiment. You have an ex-president of the United States demonizing citizens, whether they're new citizen or old citizen. What can we expect from him, both of them, if they in fact go to the next level? Vice President of the United States and President of the United States. If they act that way now, what can we expect from them then?
In light of a Supreme Court ruling that has essentially given them carte blanche to do whatever he wants if he gets into office.
And the reality of the fact that former President Donald Trump is the oldest person to be running for president. It is not
Yes.
something to miss that JD Vance could potentially be the president of the
That
United
seems to be
States.
actually the entire agenda of those who support Vance, is they expect Trump to not make it.
And you have text messages that have been leaked, and anybody can change their position because this is the United States of America, but you have to stand for something. I'm watching the flag wave beautifully in the wind, and I want to make a point of clarification. Me having an idea of running against him has nothing to do with politics. It is about what is going to be best for the people, because it should always be people over politics. George Washington, in his farewell address, which had its anniversary a couple days ago, he said, I'm going to warn you of two things, one of which was foreign entanglements, and the most important, in my opinion, was the evils of political parties. People wanted George Washington to leave because he was a leader. Granted, did he own slaves? Absolutely. Did he send federal troops after runaway slaves? Absolutely. And those enslaved people did not deserve any of that. But if we talk about what the promise of this country is and the tool that politics allows us to be here, like Dr. Scott said, sitting, at this beautiful museum that encapsulates all of what our history is and the progress that we've made. It's not about politics for me. It is about the people. And it will always be about the people, because that's who made this country. That's what makes this country great, legitimately great, is the people that either sacrifice or continue to find ways to move us forward. And that's above politics, in my opinion. So Senator Vance is, as an Ohioan, as a proud Ohioan, as somebody that admired the statement that the Republican governor made about immigration, that is about people. I can hear that as a person and I, as an affiliate of a political party, and know that that is what is going to be best for the people. And I feel like rural America can understand that. It just has to be said to them in that way. And we have to have people willing to reach out and do that.
I love this. I love the commitments that are here. Dr. Cheryl, you don't work for Common Power, so you don't exist in a daily bubble of our work of we're trying to win elections. We are committed to a mode of action that we call education to action. So want to be clear that anybody who's going to lump you in, which you had to make, I'm sure you thought about coming on this podcast. Okay, so can you close us out with why you're here and what you'd like Common Power and Common Power supporters who listen to this to know and to think about living, being there in this space?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I did grow up in rural Ohio. So I grew up in a lot of corn and, so when I think about Ohio, like that is Ohio to me. And so I think that one of the most important things that we can work toward um, has to come from not letting, right, this the divisiveness that is created, that is utilized as a political tool, right, to maintain power, to gain power among the people of Ohio. I think it's going to be really important to be able to keep talking to people and to not get so frustrated that you can't have the conversation when you disagree about something. And that's something that I worry about, something that I've seen in myself sometimes, right? Getting so frustrated and just like, I can't with you right now. I can't hear this kind of talk anymore. I can't do it. And I think to I need to be better than that. And I think we have to find a way to come to an understanding of what is happening here, right? And also people who do feel abandoned, right, by whatever the political processes have been. And I agree, that is when politicians have put politics before people. And I think if we can return to a point, or maybe we were never at that point, right? I don't know if there is a return, but a going to where we are trying to understand what is actually going on with people, what the needs of their communities are, right? What the limits of, or capabilities of government are in those situations. But I also think, I have a cynicism about what's going on with Trump and Vance as well. You ask that initial question about what's their goal here? Like, what is it that they want? And the most cynical side of me says, well, they want control of the news cycle because they lost it when Harris became the VP,
Yes.
and they lost it after that debate, right? And so this is a way to utilize sort of racist and xenophobic discourses, right, to try and regain control and regain attention of the people and put their attention on the wrong things, right? So how do we pressure politicians to put their attention on the right things that actually help people, all the people in the state? That's what I'm interested in.
All right. Thank you so much, Cheryl. Dr. Scott, do you have anything else you want to add? No, Mr. Charles? Mr. Ivory?
There is nothing beyond our capabilities as a country. And that's because we all have a shared goal. We should have a shared goal, and that's to be the best country. And that starts with the people. Starts with the people.
And at Common Power, we take action. So this is about us being outraged and angered and determined and mortified. And we aren't going to stop there. You can't sit there. Okay. You've got to move it to time and treasure. You got to do something with it. All right. And we know, all that out there who are listening to this Common Power, but that's what these podcasts are about, is moving from education to action. Dr. Cheryl Cunningham, thank you so much for joining us from Wittenberg.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. And it was really great to hear everything that y'all had to say. I mean, not great in some ways, but nice to meet you virtually and hear what you had to say and hear your thoughts.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Let's go, people. Let's go. Yes. And he's closing up.